Hi, this is Mike Hibbert. I'm back with another Django Python tutorial for you. This time we're going to look at the subject of cookies and sessions. And this will help us to set up nicely for another tutorial that I'm going to do next, which is all to do with managing users for their logins and for their registrations and that sort of thing. So first of all, we're going to take a look at the sessions and cookies, and that will help us to understand how that later stuff works. So the first thing we need to do to actually use sessions in our system is a little bit of configuration work. In our settings.py file for our project folder, in there we should see a section that says middleware classes, and in there should be a line that it may or may not be commented depending on which version of Django you're using. I'm using the brand new version that you get straight from the website, so in mine you can see it's already uncommented. If it isn't commented in your system, then just take the comment away and that should be okay. You don't have to do any typing, just make sure that it's available, and then that's it for the configuration of the Django framework. With that done, all we need to do is actually look at how to use the API. This is just one thing that we need for sessions. You don't, however, need this for cookies, so if you're not going to use sessions, don't include it, because that'll make your website a bit lighter on the memory side and on the load side when it pulls in modules. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take a look in our views.py. Now this is the views.py file for our articles app that we've created within our project, and in there we've already got two views that we created in previous tutorials. What we're going to do is we're going to slightly extend this view, the articles view, which is the one that lists all of the articles. We're going to put in a slight addition to there just to demonstrate how sessions and cookies can be used. It isn't terribly useful, but it does give you an idea of how things plug in together. So the first thing we need to do is we need to add in another module, and the one we're going to use is the HTTP response module. The reason being that we're going to do a very small view that just basically allows us to set a string within our sessions and cookies, and then more specifically we're going to set like a region string or an encoding string. So in the case of my system, it's going to be EN-GB, which is English Great Britain. And you can just basically set that at whatever string you want. It's not going to actually do anything major on this particular tutorial, but it does demonstrate how the system can work. So the first thing we do is import our HTTP response so that we can build our view. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to slightly alter the articles function, and I'm going to add a line that basically says language equals EN-GB for my region code, and session language. Now the difference between this variable and this variable is this one will be storing what's in the cookies, and this one will be storing what's inside of our session. We're going to store the same value, but I'm going to demonstrate how they get stored within those systems. Then we're going to say if lang, which is the cookie value that I'm going to put inside the cookies dictionary of information, if there is a language setting in there in the cookies, then the language should then be set to whatever the value is of the language setting in the cookies, and not what our default our default value should be. Now the next thing we need to do is we need to then place it inside of our template that we've been rendering, and to do that we just literally put in an extra comma on the end of this line here and put in a value to say that there's going to be a language variable put into that view, into that template, and this is what the value is going to be. And that's enough for that. The next thing we need to do is also to add in our new function. Now, I've made a language function, and it comes along with a request, but also a variable that's passed in with a default value of ENGB. We use our HTTP response object just to have something rendered into the browser window, which just basically says setting language to whatever the language is. And ideally what you could be able to do with this is, once you use the URL, you could actually replace the extra section on the end of the URL with some other encoding. Here is the next line, where we just basically use our response object that we've generated from HTTP response. Now notice, just to be careful, we have request and response. Carefully, don't use the request object, because you're not going to be able to use this method setCookie from that object there. What you need is your response object. So from the response object, we use the setCookie method to set a variable inside the cookies of value language, which of course defaults to ENGB for us at this moment. And then we just return the response, which should just then print our message setting language to whatever we set it to, and that'll just give us a confirmation. So that's all we need to do with the view. We need to now provide a set of URLs, and then obviously somewhere to put the values inside of our template, because this is a new URL, we haven't actually programmed it. So if we go to the URL section, we've got our previous URLs from the articles URL patterns collection. We'll add one more line, and that's a URL similar to the rest, but this time it's called language, and we're looking for a parameter to that URL on the end, which will be something along the lines of some letters and also the hyphen, because of obviously, you know, ENGB has a hyphen in, so we want that regular expression to match there. So that's good enough to actually match, and then that will be passed through as a variable to our view as the variable named language just here. And of course we end all of that by saying this is the view method to call, and that's enough for our routing. That should then pass in anything that we put on the end of that URL as an argument to the language function inside of our app. The final step is just to make some space for the actual variable to be printed. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a header tag in there, languages, and whatever the language was. So that language variable was set inside of our articles method. We turned it into that as a parameter to the render response function, which expects all the variables to be passed through for the context of this articles template. Okay, so that should be enough to get that underway. So let's just turn on our Python server, our Django server. That's up and running. What do we see now? There we go. As you can see, I've already been messing around with this tutorial, so it's set to Spanish at the minute. So let's go and change that. And the way we do that is we go language. I'll just set it back to ENGB. Here we have our message that says we've set it to ENGB. Now if I just click the back button just to go back, give it a refresh, you can now see that it's taken the value out of the cookie. So it's pulling out that language setting there, assigning it to here, and then passing it through here. That's not the the only way you could do that, you could probably reduce these lines of code back down a little further than they are at the minute, but for the sake of showing how that works, it is as it is. So what about sessions? So we've enabled the sessions middleware module inside the settings.py file. How do we actually use the sessions? Well, here's how. The next thing we do is we go, if lang is in the session request.session array, which is basically a dictionary in the same way that the cookies is. If it's in there, then set our session language to whatever the session value is, the lang setting inside of that session dictionary. And that's how you can pull information out of the session. It's very simple, nothing complicated at all really. The next bit is we do something similar to what we did with our language variable. We declare another variable that can be passed through to our template and set its value using our current local variable. Then if we go to our language view, we set the variable. Now notice the difference between the cookie and the session. The first thing we're doing is we're using the response object from our HTTP response to set a cookie value. With sessions, we use our request variable that comes in through the view and use the session dictionary and set its value through there. So there's no set cookie, it's just basically put a value in the session dictionary, and that's good enough. So now when we call this language URL, it'll now set a variable in the cookies, but it'll also set something in the session. So how we're going to differentiate which one's which and what the values are? Well, in our template we're going to add another line just underneath, and we're going to say the session language is whatever the value of that session language variable that we set just here in our view for the articles view, and that will tell us how that's set. So with that should be enough to get us to use the sessions. So I need to restart the server just so that those changes in the Python code get recompiled and the server can start up with the latest code. So there we go, and now you can see that it's the session value still matches the last variable value that I put in. So our cookie's been updated, our session variable has not. So in order to fix that, we need to go back and set our language again by calling the URL with that value on the end, and that will take this value on the end of our URL and put it into both the cookie and the session. And there you can see it's now done that. It's changed the cookie value to there, and the session value is also that setting also. So as you can see, using session variables and cookie variables is pretty simple. Some of you might argue that it's not a very good idea to use cookies. I probably agree with you, but for the purposes of this tutorial I wanted to see how these things work at the lower level, so that when we do something later on to do with users and getting people logged in and tracking whether their logins are correct, etc., you'll understand what's going on behind the scenes. So that concludes this tutorial. I hope this was informative to you, and I hope it did help you to learn something new. If you enjoyed this video, then please click the like button, and if you want to see more in the series as I produce more tutorials, then please subscribe to this channel, and I'll update you as soon as the next one's out. Okay, thanks for watching.